Welcome to VFL Masters Toronto Week 3 final game week for Masters Toronto. Obviously, this is the first time we've done VFL for a Masters or, Champs event like this. I didn't know how well it would work. I think it's worked pretty well overall. I'm quite happy with, the general layout of the format. But of course, now we're entering into the last week where it gets quite messy and a bit interesting. Because, of course, we've only got 4 teams left, right? And you can only have a max of 2 players from each team. So, obviously, a lot of people's teams are going to look somewhat similar because there just isn't that many players left, right? There's only 20 players to pick from in general. So, of course they are. But it's quite interesting, right, in terms of how this works for VFL because you've only got 4 teams left. But one of these teams, right, they're only going to play one best of 3, right? Whereas it's potential that a team is going to play 2 best of 5s, right? So one team could play 2 and, in theory, win 2 best of 5s. But one of these teams is definitely only going to play 1 best of 3 that they lose. So the potential of, picking the right teams here is quite big, in terms of if you get the right teams. And so I think if you were, had the choice of any players, you would almost certainly pick 2 players from both Wolves and Paper Rex, right? Because these teams will guarantee at least play 1 best of 5, right? They are guaranteed to at the very least, play 1 best of 5, right? And the other team will at least win a best of 3 and play in a best of 5. So that is, I think, probably what you're aiming for the most of. And then you can either, go 1-1 with Fnatic and G2, or you could take a risk and kind of gamble that, one team is going to win, and that might pay off big time because, of course, if one of these 2 teams wins this game and then goes on and wins the tournament, right, and wins this best of 5 and this best of 5, the players from that team will almost certainly be the highest scoring players, right? So I do think it is worth taking a gamble, if that is available to you, of basically just going 2 from Paper X and 2 from Wolves, and then just picking a team out of Fnatic and G2, whoever you think is going to win that game, and just going all in on 2 of those players, because if it plays out in the right way for you, you could score massive points. If it doesn't, you're probably pretty screwed. Now, when it comes to my team here, I unfortunately kind of don't have that luxury because the way it worked out for me is I've got 3 players who, made it through here, but unfortunately it's 1 G2 and 1 Fnatic, right? So I can't go all in, on one of those 2 teams because I just have one of those players already and I have to replace these 3. Could have used with Gen G winning that game against G2. Unfortunately, they're the biggest chokers that have ever lived. So unlucky, I guess. In terms of the week, I did okay. Texture again, despite obviously going out, did okay, right? You've got here, some okay scores. Foxy9 was probably the biggest disappointment overall, but I'm not too mad about it. There were better options, but I don't think I did too bad overall. It could have been worse. Obviously, I should have gone all in on Wolves. But when it comes to transferring, the players, obviously who I'm transferring out is very obvious. Luckily for me, it's actually 2 wildcards, so my options are very, very open, right? I have to get a Sentinel and 2 of any role, right? So there are quite a lot of different options, and we'll run through some of them now. Okay, so here is option number 1, which is obviously getting rid of the 3 players, going in for double Wolves, Spring, and Juicy, and bringing in Leaf as well, right? So this is the Leaf option. Obviously, this would mean that I don't have double Paper X, which I don't love, but this is the I believe in Leaf, and I potentially think that G2, could win this tournament. I picked G2 to win this tournament at the start. This is my, hey, G2 might win this tournament, and Leaf might be the MVP. If I wanted to go in that direction, this is how I could do it, right? Because there aren't a ton, in terms of other Sentinel options that I could get. Of course, you're looking at Devi as a potential, which is okay. You've got Alpha as a potential, which is costly. And the problem is, I do think that I personally would pick G2 to win that game, right? So I don't necessarily feel great about that. But then there's Leaf, and of course there's Lysor as well, right? But Lysor, I think if I'm picking a Wolves player, I'd rather have Spring or Juicy. Now, there is a part of me that, of course, doesn't want to curse Wolves and doesn't want any Wolves players at all. But then I was going to go down that route, and then I thought, no, I'm a logical man that doesn't believe in curses, so I am going to pick some Wolves players. So this is option 1. And this is option 2, where I do go for Devi. I get Sufat Baby, and then I get either Jorgamo or Kayak, right? And I have a choice of either of those, whoever I think. Again, I personally would say I think G2 are going to win, but I could go, if I wanted to go heavy in, you know, I could go for something like this. And again, this could be okay. Sufat Baby has actually had, you know, some pretty good maps overall. You know, his points haven't been horrendous by any means. And if I think, you know, Jorgmo, big game player, and if I think maybe G2 are going to win this event, this could be another good way of doing it by getting double Paper X and potentially Jorgmo. But this is another option that I have that I also quite like, right? Which is going for Devi again, getting the double Paper X, sorting out the Sentinel issue, and going for Trent and Juicy. And by having Trent and Juicy, perhaps this team is lacking a clear IGL, but across the board, you know, this is looking like a pretty solid team overall. And again, if G2 do well, then this could do very, very well, of course. But then finally, we come to the one that I think makes the most sense overall for me, and that is this. This is the team that I think I will end up going for, and that is going for Lysor as the Sentinel, bringing in Jing, who of course has been frying kind of out of his mind, and still being able to get Juicy as well from Wolves. So this still gives me here double Paper X, double Wolves, right? So I'm getting players that will play a best of 5. I'm getting Jing, which obviously I really, really like as well. And yeah, this looks, you know, okay. This looks like it's something that could potentially work. Now, if I really think G2 will do well in this tournament, I could still get rid, for instance, of Juicy and bring in Valen, right? If I really think that G2 are going to win, I could still go for this, right? And that is where I am right now, that I'm stuck between those two options. I'm pretty sure I want Jing. I want Jing to be my IGL in this overall, I think. But I'm just not quite sure in which order I'm going for. Am I going Juicy and kind of playing it safe and maybe, you know, thinking that Wolves will do well? Or am I going Valen and thinking, well, G2 I still think might actually win this tournament, and if they do, maybe this is actually the way to get the most points. So that is where I'm going to leave it, because initially I did kind of commit to one of those plans, but having gone and edited that video and now looking at the team again, I became very unsure and was like, wait a minute, that's a terrible idea. That won't get you a lot of points. So yeah, I'm going to probably just wait until, you know, around the games are actually going to start, you know, think about it. What would you do if you were me? Which one of those options do you think makes the most sense?